Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell. You know, some comedians are said to have comedy in their genes, others are said to have funny bones. Well, in a bizarre deviant forensic surgery, I hope to dissect their brains and discover why comedians put their heart into what they do, without putting their foot in it. Do you see? I love talking to people in comedy about comedy. If you'd like to hear what they have to say as much as I do, then please like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode would, I hope, agree that he lives up to the Liverpudlian reputation of having an excellent, if cheeky, sense of humour. He's an outstanding comedian and one of the best MCs I've seen. Debuting his first solo hour at Edinburgh this year, it's stand-up comedian Jamie Allerton. Hello, mate.
Hey, mate, how we doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, if you're good, we'll just crack on.
Yeah, sure.
What was your comedy like when you was growing up in Liverpool? Did you have a big comedy family, lots of fun gathered around the TV, that sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something about the Scouse personality where it is that kind of always ripping each other.
Yeah.
And always trying to find fun. And I was the youngest of three, so there was that thing of like trying to get attention by, making jokes and making light of everything.
Yeah.
So I was always the funny one out of my siblings, which I make sure they know all the time. But I'd say my parents are kind of they're very different from each other. My mum's really outgoing,
right,
and my dad's really he internalizes everything. So I've kind of got aspects of both of them, because my dad hates any group or crowd that's bigger than two, whereas my mum will go up and make friends to anyone.
Yeah.
So I've kind of had aspects of both of them rubbed off on me.
Yeah. So you'll go up and make friends with groups of two.
I'll go up and make groups of people, but make sure that they know that I do not like them and I don't want to spend time with them.
So did you have big influences growing up, sort of people that you watched on TV or people you saw do live comedy?
Yeah, I always liked the silly stuff. Like, luckily, my sister's kind of 14 years older than me, which means that we got things that children weren't normally watching, like, a lot of Vic and Bob.
Yeah.
We'd watch Bottom. I remember that was our Friday would be, get a bath, come down, and we'd all watch Bottom.
Yeah.
Because I just loved the kind of slapstick, stupid stuff. And Red Dwarf was a big factor growing up. I think there weren't many kind of people from Liverpool on TV back in the 90s.
Right.
And to have a kind of flagship sitcom from the Beeb where you had someone from Liverpool.
Yeah.
With, you could hear someone who spoke like us. That was obviously, my accent's been chipped away now from living with Romies and Austrians and, people from all over the world have had a go chipping away at my accent. But it was nice to hear a Scouser on kind of, prime time Friday night.
Yeah. So what was it that inspired you to become a comedian yourself?
I just failed at everything else, really, I think. It was always... It's kind of hack, but it was always in me to, like, any job that I did, it still felt like I wasn't doing the right thing. And I got to about 28 and 30 was knocking on the door, and I'd said I'd always go and do stand up. I was living in Northampton at the time,
right?
And it was just the fact that the job I was doing, I was coming to the end of my contract, and I said, I'm gonna give stand up a go. Like I used to do stand up in our school playground. And,
right.
There would be lunch times where I'd just get crowds and I'd just do stupid stuff and it'd be riffing with people.
Right.
And then I'd do kind of around 15, 16, I'd do like local church fetes and stuff like that. I'd open for like local comics and just do silly stuff. And then it all went as soon as I got to university, and I let a decade go by. And then thought, oh no, that was the thing I was supposed to have been doing the whole time, was stand up. So I'll give up all this money that I've got, all this independence, all this respect that my family and peers have for me. I'll get rid of that and I'll go tell jokes in pubs.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll see if I'm any good.
Right.
And like I'm all right, I guess. But part of me going into it was like, if I'm crap at this, that'll be great, because then at least I can say I did it.
Yeah.
But I can go back into like nicely paying jobs and say, well, we gave it a go, but now I can buy a house.
Yeah. So did you know the kind of comedian that you wanted to be at that early stage?
No, no idea.
Yeah.
I probably I didn't get into doing stand up till I was about 27, 28.
Right.
So oh yeah, it must have been about 28, 29. So I probably thought like in my head it was one of the, not an edgelord, but just people saying things off the cuff and
Yeah.
telling it like it is, all the wanky stuff that you say at 20, not realizing that like a lot of the fun that I get from my routines is like internalized things, things, problems I find in myself
Right.
that then you can reflect that back at people and say, well, this is a problem I have. So
Yeah.
I assume some of the people in this room also have this problem.
Right.
And that's like the fun of it. But I never like my favorite comics. I don't think if you look at my style, you could say, oh, there's a clear trajectory there. Like
Right.
I'd say Richard Pryor is probably, in the top 5 of my comics.
Yeah.
Like Richard Pryor and Rick Mail, but I don't know if I can draw a line
Right.
from them to kind of what I do.
Right. Do you have peers today that continue to inspire you?
None.
No.
Absolutely none. No, I tend to watch the American comics a lot more just because
Right.
I think it was Jim Jeffries who said that he found it dangerous kind of watching stand-ups when he got into stand-up.
Right.
Just because you'd kind of worry about covering the same topics.
Right. Okay.
So there's elements of one, even like those who are at the top of the game, there's still an element of busman's holiday when you go to watch.
Right.
Like I think the only live comic that I've seen and paid for in the last 5 years was probably Stuart Lee.
Right.
Just because I am a cliche. But that was because I live in London and my brother lives in Liverpool, so I did as a Christmas present to get me tickets for Stuart Lee in Liverpool.
Right. Yeah.
Which meant that the cost of me going back up to Liverpool to watch the show cost more than the actual tickets themselves. But yeah, I think this sounds really wanky, but I prefer being inspired by like just things around me than actual other comics. Because otherwise, when you watch other comics, you just tend to get annoyed by a fantastic bit where you're like, oh, I wish I'd written that. Or, you might see someone who absolutely ruins a bit.
Right.
And you go, if me or a friend had written this, we would have turned this into something great. But you can't steal it. You can't just say, well, you're not good enough to have this bit, actually. So we're just going to take this and give it to someone who should have it. Comedy should be run kind of like a company where you go, we don't think you're at this level to say, yeah, women do this and men do this sometimes. So we're going to give that bit over to, Jeff and accounts.
So when you're emceeing, obviously you see the other actors, you're bringing them on, and if that's going through your mind, are you looking at them always as a comedian? Are you able to, if there is a good gag, are you able to laugh, or do you always just skip ahead to the punchline or analyze the structure?
So I like one of my prime things is always to make sure that the night goes well. As an MC, some MCs will go, oh, I'll use this to throw in. I very rarely do material as an MC.
Right.
Just because my main focus is on is the night going well. So when I see an act going on, I'll laugh, kind of even benefit of the doubt laughs, just to make sure that there is some laughter in the room. Because some of them pubs can be pretty harsh. So yeah, I watch the act, but I'm mainly kind of watching the room as well, or I'm thinking of stuff to say because I'll make a note about who's doing what in the room,
right?
Or can I riff on something that they've said when I come up?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's enjoyable because you're getting the best of both worlds because you stand at the back of the room and you get to watch a live gig,
that
you haven't paid for, and then the bonus is you then get to get up on stage, and take part in it as well.
Yeah.
I suppose it'd be like, imagine if a footballer wants to pass the ball, he gets to just sit in the stand and watch Messi do what he does.
Yeah. Do you prefer emceeing or being an act?
I guess it's not a preference. It's they're just both really different. Like some nights, I think it's more fun to be an MC,
right?
But then you can kind of get more out of being an act. If people come up to you and say you were the best on the night, if you were the MC, that tends to mean the acts have been a bit shit. And if people come up to you and say you were the best on the night and you're an act, that feels fantastic, and that little ego stroke is literally the only reason why 90% of us do it.
Yeah.
It's because it's that instant ego of, oh, I've created something and someone has said this is good.
Yeah.
So I suppose it depends what mood I'm in as well. You know, sometimes if you look at the actual technicalities of it, it is nice being an act because your job tonight is only for 20 minutes.
Right.
And you can go home.
Yeah.
And that, you know, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, that can feel great to go by 9 o'clock. I am done and dusted, and the MC is not getting out of there till 10:30. But then on the other side, the MC kind of controls the energy in the room, which I like. You know, if I'm on a gig where there's not a very good MC, it is kind of me watching over someone while they're driving, going, oh, you know, that person over there gave you a really easy layup on what their job is, and you didn't go for any of it. Things like that. So I'd say I don't have a preference. It's just that depending on what mood or what I need from that day,
right?
It kind of differs.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to answer directly any of your questions today, Mark. They're all going to go off in a tangent where when we get back around to it, I have not really provided a thorough answer.
Quite right. Well, I've seen you MC many times. I've seen many people MCing, as you can imagine. I think you're one of the best at it. So,
cheers, man.
I've also seen your act. So, you know, I'm not going to talk about that.
And who's your least favorite MC? You know, just name some names.
No. I'm not going down that road. Too many to name.
There is a danger of just being known as an MC, which is why I try to keep it about 50-50.
Yeah.
I MC more in London just because people know me as an MC.
Right.
But when I'm gigging outside of London, it tends to be, you know, opens or Midland for some gigs just to make sure that I'm not getting known as the MC. Yeah. I've seen people trapped in that.
Sure.
And even gigs where I'll be introduced to them as an MC, I'll make sure to follow up and say, can I come back and do a spot so that you can see me, not just say, what's your job? That's a silly job, isn't it? Absolutely got you there.
So what was your that first stand-up set that you did? What was that experience like?
So my first ever one. Yeah. So I kind of a little background to my life. I was in Northampton for a decade. I went to university in Northampton. Mm-hmm. Then I started working at Barclaycard there, which credit card companies, they pay a lot of money. It was quite nice. I used to be happy, Mark. But then I left there. I moved back to Liverpool for a year, and I took the Hot Water Comedy Club course.
Right. Yeah.
Which was bizarre because everybody there was kind of, you know, I'm coming up to a wedding and I want to be able to say my best man speech.
Right.
Or, you know, I struggle in talking to groups, so I just want a bit of confidence. And I was the only one in the group that was like, no, I want to go up on stage in comedy clubs and tell jokes. So it was kind of tailored very lightly to the point that even, I won't say who the instructor was, or the teacher, but after I'd written my first set and kind of we'd gone over it, he pointed out like, oh, you know how you've said that your mum's in a mobility scooter here, and then you mentioned it at the end. That's called a callback. And I was like, I know, that's why I did it. And I think because, you know, since I was a kid, I'd been studying the theory of comedy.
Right.
The only real thing I got out of that course was that I met a couple of people who were willing to go to gigs with me. Then, because I know for me it was worth the price just to not, you know, travel up from Liverpool to Manchester to do my first spot up there. But my first ever gig would have been the graduation gig.
Sure. Yeah.
That we put on. Now, if you do a comedy course, the graduation gig is normally like the easiest gig you can do. Everyone in the room is supportive. You know, you can fart into the microphone and get a standing ovation. But when we did it, a couple of the people had brought some quite aggressive family members, including one local DJ who really wanted the attention on him.
Yeah.
So the guy before me, he told a 5-minute story about giraffes that played to zero laughs. Because it was quite highbrow. Like, he had some really good gags in there, but
right.
It wasn't kind of your standard, end of the pier stuff that you do at a graduation gig. And then I came up and told a story. Like the first ever set that I'd written was a story about me getting drunk at a charity event with my friend.
Of course.
And I got locked in a barn and nearly set it on fire. I cut my head open and ended up like it was all one of them stories where if you're sat around with one of your friends who you know, it's funny. But I started to realize kind of 2 minutes into my set, I don't know anyone here, and it's just me going, look how cool I am when I got drunk, bloody blah.
Yeah.
And so I kind of played to maybe 3 laughs over the course of 5 minutes. And this guy at the back just shouted giraffe. just to let me know that I was bombing as hard as the guy who'd been on previously. So that was my first gig, which I was actually really, really grateful for that it bombed.
Right.
Because I went home and the next day I said, well, either I can keep working on that, or I can scrap it all and write a completely different set, and get go really deep into something. So then my second set that I wrote, because I'd bombed so hard, it was kind of this it's your first, you still get into comedy, so it's not complex or exciting, but it was just the idea of imagining a war between fat people and thin people and what tactics they use. But it meant that I drew on kind of some more personal things instead of just telling a story of getting drunk. And that set, I did that a few times and then ended up getting into the final of Liverpool New Comedian.
Right, yeah.
Which I would not have done if I'd done okay on that first gig.
Yeah.
And just carried on telling, it was what I'd consider a pint in the hand set. You come up on stage with the pint and you go, I was getting drunk, I'm the best, I threw up on a girl, and instead it was I kind of was like, hang on, there's a bit of self-loathing here, maybe we can throw that out instead.
So at the end of the course, after you've done the showcase there, did you get feedback? Did they unpack it?
No. We went for a pint afterwards, and it was great because I got to talk to a lot of the hot water people.
Right.
And it was setting up them relationships that if I'd stayed in Liverpool, I probably would have, strengthened. But only a couple of months later, a friend of mine called me crying, and she said, I'm getting a divorce and I'm moving to London. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, okay, fuck it. All right. Are we all right to swear on this, or do you have to bleep them out?
Knock yourself out.
All right. I know from running one, sometimes people talk and you're like, well, I'm gonna have to edit that out now. That's great. But yeah, I was maybe 5 gigs in Liverpool, and then we moved down to London, and had to kind of. So I'd say I started on the open mic circuit in London. I didn't really get to know anyone in the Northwest.
All right. Coming to London, performing London after having done all of those 5 gigs, was it like a culture shock comedically?
Yeah, it was odd because you have to. I don't really speak colloquially that much anyway. As a northern accent, it's not that hard for Southerners to understand what I say, and also I think because I was raised on movies a lot, more of my slang tends to be American than actual Scouse. I'd say, sometimes I'll say the wrong thing for boot, or
right,
where friends will get annoyed at me. But it was odd because the first 2 gigs that I did, one was, I think everybody who's gigged in London has done Comedy Virgins. Where you're playing to 60 people. It's like a really electric night, and that was the first gig that I did in London.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a competition which I won. Sure, fine. If you bending my arm behind my back, fine, Mark. Yes, I did win it. The first gig I did in London. Sure. Well, I went from that to then an open mic 4 days later, where there was 5 comics and then 1 actual audience member above a pub, and the comics in the room had said no, this is more what it's like than the gig you went to. I was like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. What do you think? Well, I've been to so many of those gigs where I've been the only audience member. Sometimes the comics have outnumbered me 7 or 8 to 1. How do you feel when you go into that room? Is it disheartening, and do you call it off, or do you just perform for each other, or how does it go for you?
So I remember the first one of those that properly, after I'd gotten to know most comedians.
Yeah.
There was a gig at South Kent, so I already had my routine, and my routine was very kind of train track. It was,
Right.
these are the points that I've got to hit.
Yeah.
And it was at South Kensington. There was like 8 comics and no audience.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I guess we're calling this off. And someone said, no, we'll just do a workshop. And I was terrified because I was like, but everyone in this room has seen my material, 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, just have a mess about. And then it was actually really liberating. Like for 5 minutes, I just said stuff off the top of my head, and some of it didn't land.
Yeah.
Some of it did, and the stuff that did, you're like, oh, I can take that. So I, as long as you're not tricked into it, I'm really happy to do them, like those old school workshops.
Yeah.
Where, unless someone said to you, oh, there's going to be 50 audience there, and you'll be gone. You could open.
Yeah.
When it's like a workshop, you can't open and then be like, all right, well, I'm going now. So
yeah.
bye. But luckily, I haven't had to do that for a few years.
Right. You mentioned about competitions. So how do you feel entering into a competition and being up like against your peers?
I am terrible in competitions. I'm awful. I think because my persona is one of it's weird because it's low status but angry at being low status. Kind of, I don't need to explain high status, low status to your audience, do I? They know.
I would hope they know what that means.
Yeah. So mine, very early on, it was self-deprecating, and then I found I was getting like a lot of R's thrown in with the laughs, and I was
right.
Like, well, how do I counteract that? So I made it that it was self-deprecating, but then I was angry at the audience for laughing at the self-deprecating stuff, it was just a mild switch, but it meant I had a little bit more power in the room because I was now angry at that audience about my own situation.
Right.
So with competitions, it's weird because I like to come out you've seen me come up, like most of the time when I come out, I'm screaming, I'm saying yes, I'm shouting at people. And when it's a competition, it just means that there's more of a facade there because really they know that I need their approval.
Right.
And I've come to that venue for their approval. So it just kind of, it means that all this bravura that I've got, it doesn't matter because I've actually said, oh, please love me,
Yeah.
And so I was doing one competition where in the Museum of Comedy, where I normally I do quite well with hecklers because I'm so loud when I come out.
Yeah.
Most people who are going to heckle are like, oh, he's quite shouty, so I'm not sure I want this. And I did my usual. So before I even get to the microphone, I'm screaming, yes, 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 just to try and get people excited. And I got to the microphone on this competition, and there was a girl on the front row just went, oh no. And it just knocked me sideways. The whole set, I could only put about 70% of effort in because it was just in my head that this girl had absolutely deflated me.
Jeez.
I hope I find her one day and be like, look, I'm doing okay. Not great, but I'm doing okay. I'm doing enough to have to check, should I be paying tax?
So you've talked about like telling personal stories. How much of the person on stage are we seeing is the real Jamie? How much of a character are you on stage as opposed to off?
I'd say probably 80%.
Right.
I reckon it's very close. There's not a lot of opinions that I'd spout on stage that I don't actually have.
Yeah.
I think not all comedy has to be true. If you just take, I prefer, and also, especially when I first started out, I panicked about remembering my set.
Right.
And I was like, well, if it's true, then I don't have to worry about remembering it.
Yeah.
Kind of like if anyone cheating on the spouse, you have to remember, get some truth in there, and then you can keep holding to whatever small lies you've got. So I'd say the only things that are missing from me on stage, where I'm a bit more of a dickhead off stage, I'd say. Kind of I'm meaner to my friends, I say darker jokes. But on stage, I like the persona that I've got on stage, especially when I'm emceeing. And also I know exactly where my friends' lines are, and me personally, I don't like pushing the line of an audience and saying, oh, well, we'll see how far we can push this. Like, I'll still say some cheeky stuff.
Yeah.
But it'll be done with a bit of a wink and I don't like being mean on stage. So I think that's probably the only part of me that I keep back.
Yeah.
From that persona. But apart from that, most of it is me on there.
Right. Do you see it as like going into an act in the sense of that you're playing a role?
Yeah, you do change. And it's weird because like I'll feel weird when I'm emceeing. As soon as I get off the stage, I've got a little notepad,
right,
and I write down all the names of the people that I've learned, what I've learned about them, if they're in a relationship or if they've said something,
right,
just so that when I'm back on stage, I can reference that again.
Yeah.
And if an audience member sees that notepad, then I do kind of I do feel a bit bad because it's kind of showing them behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Because they want to think that you're friends with them and that you've just remembered all that.
Yeah.
So there is an element of like I can tell the difference in my voice when I get off stage, and if someone comes up and says that was great or that was awful, give me my money back. I know that I guess because when I'm talking to someone on stage, I'm not actually talking to them. I'm talking to the room.
Yeah.
I want the whole room to overhear this conversation that we're having.
Right.
So I guess that's the big difference in kind of who I am. And also, I guess if it's in terms of me doing a set, there's a big, I think I push the kind of, not just self-loathing, but the kind of, oh, my life is in tatters. People like to know that your life is in tatters. And then you get off stage and you go, oh, actually, things are pretty good. So I'm all right.
Yeah.
So there is an element of a character there, but I think that character is still 80% me.
Right.
We want to start putting on wigs and stuff. We'll see. I'll have a mess about.
So when you turn professional then and you're entered into the comedy industry, did you have any specific expectations of what that would mean? Were you surprised by anything?
I think professional is a strong word to describe.
Oh, it's a broad term.
How I go. Do you know the big shocker, which I didn't see coming, was that I don't hang around with my friends from the circuit anymore, because you go from doing gigs where there's 8 to 12 acts on a night when you first start out, and you just hang around with the same people, and you kind of take it for granted that and then I'll have a pint with these people, or we'll catch up, we'll share gigs. And then once you move on to pro lineups where it tends to be 3 comedians and 1 MC
right
most of the time, and also as you're moving up the ranks, you're the bottom, kind of the little fish in that group,
right?
So you don't know them more professional acts, and they tend to know each other as you're coming up. So that was the big shock. I was like, oh, these are people I don't know, and it's not a case of, but now I know them and I'll see them next week. It's a case of we won't see each other for a while, because there's just less people on their bills. So that was the big shocker.
How often, realistically, do the paths cross when you're moving around, gigging around the country?
I guess if it's outside of London, then you're probably meeting at least 50% of that lineup is new,
right?
And you might hate the other person, But then inside of London, it's that I think I know pretty much every act,
right,
that's within the M25. Luckily, though, I know that there is a country outside of the M25.
Yeah, that's why you're going to Liverpool.
Yeah. £3 Guinness. I can't wait.
There you go. So last year you went to Edinburgh Fringe with Hubert Mayer and you did a split bill. What was that experience like doing that show?
Oh God, I had to carry him so much. No, that was good. I'm sure you remember I broke my wrist 4 days before the Edinburgh Fringe. So it wasn't the best. I wanted this to be like a big blowout because I knew that I'd be debuting the following year. So this year,
Yeah.
where there's a lot more work that goes into it. You're a lot more stressed. You can't be having those silly nights where you get in at 6 a.m. So we were building up to it going, well, we're doing the free fringe. We've not invested that much money in it, or somehow our accommodation costs were really low as well. So we're like, we'll just have fun with this one. So the pressure was off. And then 4 days before, broke my wrist. So
yeah,
I was on like loads of painkillers.
Yeah.
At times I'd be drinking just to stop like the pain in my wrist. Like the gigs were fun.
Yeah.
And it's nice because a lot of people do a split bill kind of earlier on than where we were, but just coming out of the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
It was harder to find places to do your solo shows. So we were like, well, let's just have a mess about and do a split bill.
Yeah.
So that was great because you learn a lot of stuff, but it's not that kind of. I've done longer sets in Edinburgh before, so it wasn't a case of like this is vital for my growth,
right? Which
meant it could be a bit more fun.
Yeah. So what about your debut this year? What's that about? What are you expecting from it?
I think there'll be a few complaints probably. No, I'm excited about it this year because it's all about films. The show's called Jamie Allerton Goes to the Movies, and I think I don't normally talk a lot about films on stage. So a lot of people don't know that my university degree, I studied film.
Yeah,
and growing up in Bootle in Liverpool, which is like there's a lot of gangs there, and I was more of a shut-in kid who was just watching films all the time. Our local video store, the guy knew me, so it wasn't a case of, oh, this is an 18, so I'll have to wait for your mum. He just let me rent anything. Yeah. I think he's dead now, so that's fine for me to say. So it's been nice to kind of, I've been learning all these experiences, learning like all these comedy skills over the last 8 years, and then anything before that, there's been like my love of film, and it's been nice to combine the two. So I think people who've seen my comedy before, where it's more shouty and more negative about my life, than the change in the show is that this is a celebration of movies and kind of how movies have impacted me. So in a way, it's a lot more personal as well, because you can kind of see how films have rubbed off on me, whereas all the other stuff I've done, I've gone, oh, what am I willing to show people? I'll just show them a little bit of me. Yeah. Whereas this is more, I'd say this is more personal. Right. But there's jokes. There is jokes. Jesus.
There is jokes.
It's funny.
It's not an hour-long diatribe about the battleship Potemkin or something like
that. No, that's just the first 15 minutes.
Okay, that's all right. And then it's all too fast, too furious after that.
Yeah. But there is, I mean, I do riff on kind of those pretentious movie fans, who are, absolute arseholes. Like a part of the show where I talk about how the first time I ever watched John Wick, it was on a blag copy. Me and my friend, we watched it, and it was really dark. And I said to them, "This is really bold of them to shoot this entire fight scene in black silhouette. Like this is German expressionism that they're doing in this big Hollywood film." And then we realized that the setting, the brightness was just down on the TV, and we turned it up, and it was a normal fight scene. And so for the rest of the film, my friend was just going, "Is this German expressionism? Is that?" So it's like there is a lot of piss taken of those pretentious like film fans who are like, I really found the mise en scene moving to me. Like it was Transformers. Shut up.
But you also talk about movies in your podcast, Best Movie 2. I haven't seen Best Movie 1, but so what's the premise behind that? What made you decide to do it?
So this came from, in my friend groups, I'm known as the film guy. So I'll get messages from people who say, I'm having a day off sick. What's the best movie for me to watch? Or, this has happened. What should I watch? Right. And I find it really enjoyable to go through all the different apps. Yeah. And then make lists for people, and I'll go, this is on iPlayer, this is on Netflix, this is on Prime. You should watch this because you like this. And then I thought, so for the idea for the podcast is we take a different idea each week. Now, it doesn't always have to be, but it tends to be like a mood or a situation that you're in. So we've got what is the best movie, and as long as the episode answers a question, what is the best movie to?
Yeah.
So it'd be, what is the best movie to watch if you're hungover? What is the best movie to watch if you've just gone through a breakup? But even to the point, we've got some series planned. So what is the best movie to watch in the Star Wars franchise?
Right.
Things like that. So it's just, people can easily flick through the episode list and go, oh, that's the mood I'm in right now. So I'll listen to that, and we'll normally get it doesn't have to be another comedian on, but I think just because I'm used to bouncing off comedians, it's good. We get a different guest each week, and we just fanny about for an hour. But we answer that question at the end of it, and we throw up like a bunch of ideas for people, so they can then go, oh, well, that's what I'm in the mood for now.
Yeah. So tell me about your best and worst gig that you've had so far.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if other comics do this, but I kind of have a ranking of your 5 best, and then some will drop out, and stuff comes in.
Yeah,
I think the one that told me like I'd made it, that felt like I'd made it, was my first corporate gig that I did, where I think someone had given them this agency my name by mistake, or like, because they quoted me the pay, and I had to do that kind of thing of, that's about how much I should be. That's me. Not, you don't want me to pass this on as a message to someone. That is how much. And it was up in Manchester, so they'd offered to pay for my trains to Manchester, a hotel in Manchester, and it was for Jameson's, the whiskey company, and Jameson's is probably my favorite spirit as well. And I was on with Kay Kurd. He was really, really nice. I was opening for him.
Yeah.
And it was just a corporate, so there was only about 40 people in there, really chilled, really laid back. And I was panicking beforehand, because there's the thing of, the higher the gig, the more you think, oh, I shouldn't be here. And you only get to repeat them gigs once you've done them, to say, oh no, I actually smashed that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
And luckily there's a guy in the front row who's called Toby, and as you know, I have probably 2 hours worth of material on Toby Carvery, and so I just started whipping out all my Toby Carvery material, but trying to make it seem like I was just coming up with it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And they were all clapping along, going, "Wow, that's astounding that you just thought that up." And I was like, "Yes, that is something I've just thought up, and not material I'd put together to try and get Toby Carvery to follow me on Twitter." So that's up there. There was one, we run gigs sometimes up in Liverpool, in a place called the Denby Castle. It's a great little pub in town, and they've got a nice little 60-seater downstairs.
Right.
And the first one that we did of that was great, because I had all my family and friends in, actual real audience as well, and I was emceeing it, and it was one of them where every single audience interaction was just gold. Like, they were giving me something fantastic. Like, there was a couple in the front row. Yeah. One was a lorry driver, and the other, and his wife, kind of, she would not stop talking even when I was trying to talk to other people, but in a really nice way, so that I could just carry on taking the piss out of her. And every single person in there had something interesting about them, had something you could riff on. And it was nice to kind of do that in front of my parents, to show this is, the whole reason for me dropping out from the bank and getting into this. You see in the tools on display now, which was nice. And then kind of as my own personal, like, in terms of a gig that I came out of, because I'd played to so many, I hit my audience capacity at over 400 last month in Walthamstow, and that was great to go, all right, I can play to a big audience as well, because my style tends to be getting into the front row, talking to people. I'm more comfortable with a lower stage where I'm actually in the audience. So that was nice to challenge myself with an audience where you're not directly talking to one person. You have to make sure that, because if you start talking to Frank up in the front row, all the way back of the room, someone's going to be like, well, I don't know what this guy looks like. I don't give a shit. So that was that's it. Those 3 are definitely in my top 5.
Yeah.
I'd have to have a sit down on the toilet to think about what the other 2 are going.
And what about the other end of the spectrum?
the West. The one, I've had a couple of really dodgy ones. There was one where I was chased out the back of a pub, with Josh Bowles.
Yeah.
It was new. I think it was like New Year's Eve, but no, it was Boxing Day. It was Boxing Day,
right,
up in Epping, and we've been hired to do this pub gig, and I was like, great, nice pub gig in Epping.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm fine with a pub gig where it's, you know, a group of darts players in the 40s and 50s. You know, I can play to that. What we found out when we got to the venue is that it was the local for this village,
right?
But they were charging on the door, so people were paying a ticket admission just to go into their local, not really wanting to watch comedy.
Yeah.
So they already hated us by time we got there.
Yeah.
We didn't know this, so we were wondering, why is everyone so angry? So we started giving it back to the audience. And by the time I got on stage, I was like saying to some fellas at the bar, I was like, I'm going to come back and do this gig next year, because from the looks of it, you'll be dead by then. And we all got into it with them. And then the fella who was running it came in and went, so you can't go out the front. We're going to have to go out the back and just run to the car, pretty much. He's not there. And he was like, I'm the promoter, so they've not seen me. I'm going to go start the car. And we were like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, I'm going to start the car, and I'm going to put the front seat forward. So one of you needs to jump in the back. Let's get that seat back as soon as possible. So that was one of the worst.
The Blues Brothers escape.
Yeah. But do you know when that happens, and then you're like, oh, no one actually threw a punch, so it's an okay story, but it's not a great story. Like, I wasn't put in hospital. I did a gig in a boxing ring once, which was one of the worst that I've done. But that was a weird one, because I knew going into it that it was going to be bad, so I kind of could just enjoy it. Right, there was no expectations. So it was in Northampton, and this really lovely fella, like, he was nice. He runs a blue collar boxing event. And it was in the Travel Lodge in Northampton, and they've got the function room, and it's he messaged me out the blue, and he's like, do you want to, if you come and do this gig, I'll promote your socials. Like, he paid me as well, but he was like, I'll promote your socials.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, all right, mate. We've heard this before. But then he tagged me in something, and I picked up like 800 followers off the back of this, like, one tagging. And it was all these sports people who were just like really supportive, like everyone within his community. And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, fair enough. I'll go do it. Even though what he'd lined up as, in between each boxing match, he had a singer, then he had a rapper, and then he had me, a comedian. So there was no comedians on.
Right.
And about 60% of the people watching the fights knew that in between the fights, that's when you go up and get a drink. Yeah. So when you get introduced to the stage or the ring, you're faced with more than half the people in the room getting up and going as they're saying your name. On top of that, the microphone, because it wasn't a proper PA system.
Yeah.
The microphone was one of them where if you slightly move it, it cuts out.
Right, yeah.
So everything, you like 2 minutes in, and I was supposed to do 15. I think I did about 8. 2 minutes in, I gave up on the microphone. I just was shouting at people, and like, my friend who lives in Northampton had picked me up from the station, and I'd got him in.
Yeah.
And I'd said to him, look, this is going to be atrocious, but you're going to enjoy it, because from the outside, it will be me dying on stage, but I know exactly why I'm dying. So, so I won't feel bad about it. And he was like, that's weird. Like, it could go well. I was like, there's no way that this is going to go well. And at one point I was being heckled from all 4 sides of the ring, which I was like, this is pretty funny. I've never been heckled in the round before. And luckily I brought it back with some guy. I could hear some lad behind me. He was only about 15, and he turned to his mate and said, you should call him Family Guy. And I heard it. And so I turned around and I ripped into him, and I was like, why are you telling him to call me Family Guy? Why don't you fucking say it to my face? And he went bright red, and I was like, do you get him to kiss your missus as well? What are you doing? And like, I just absolutely destroyed this lad, to the point that everyone was like, oh, okay, he's actually done well there. Yeah. The absolutely worst one, I know, like,
that wasn't it.
That was just preamble to the one. Okay. The one that will stay with me for life is I did a a golf team's kind of awards evening, where the guy called me up. He was absolutely out in the sticks, and this guy called me up and said, "I've seen your videos on YouTube. I think you'd be good as our kind of comedian at the end of the night."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, it's golf. I don't know if that's not really my stick." And he was like, "No, it's a great group of lads. It's not what you think, and it'll be fun."
Yeah.
So I agreed to it, and then he said, "And it's black tie. So have you got a tuxedo?" I was like, "Oh God, this." This isn't going to go great. And it said, just do 20 minutes at the end. Got there, and I like to go off into a dark room and just write out my set, plan everything. Got there, and they were like, come upstairs to the VIP section. We're going to let you talk to all the old captains. And I was like, okay, that's already this has started going wrong. And then he went, oh, and we'll get your fee sorted now. And I was like, oh, and I was trying to say, I do find it bad luck to get my fee up hand. I always prefer to get my fee afterwards.
Right.
And as I'm trying to say that, someone hands an envelope to me, and I was like, oh, okay, so you might as well just put a black cat across me now. And then I got introduced, and I thought, well, I'll just come out, when it's my time. And they were like, so you're going to sit on the top table with us, all the old captains, while we have a 3-course meal. So everyone in the room has to stand up while he introduced me as the after dinner speaker, not the comedian, the after dinner speaker. So they're all sat there going, well, is he like an ex-pro? We don't recognize him. What's he? Because normally you think after dinner speaker, you think of like John Fashanu off somewhere telling stories, And so I sat there, and I was trying to get drunk because I was like, I need to. But the guy who was paying me was right next to me. So I was subtly trying to get as many drinks because I was like, this is going to be terrible. It's all circular. There's about 8 circular tables, bright lighting. They do their speeches. Now, naturally, of course, every comedian has got the tale of when this has happened, when they've said, let's just take a minute to remember the people who died over the last year. So everyone's sad, and they're like, not forgetting Frank's dad, and Frank's in the corner sobbing. And then they go, and now it's time for your entertainment.
And now comedy.
And they give me a microphone, and I'm literally just stood in the middle of this room. Like, there's no stage, there's no everybody turn your chairs.
Yeah.
So at any point, at least 30% of the people have their back to me because it's all circular tables.
Yeah.
There were 2 lads in there who were younger than 40, I'd say, and they were the sons of the guy who was paying me. It was, again, supposed to do 20.
Yeah.
Came off after, I think, 12. Because I noticed the guy who had paid me wasn't looking at his watch, and I was like, I'm doing him a favor by coming up, because it was anything I was trying to sell, they were not buying. And then my enduring memory is just that this guy in his 80s with his head between his hands, just shaking his head. While I was literally behind him. I was like a foot behind him, and I put my hands on his shoulder and I had to go, I'm going soon, don't worry. This is over soon. And because that was one where, when I said thank you, the claps were, the golf claps of what they clap on the course. And I'd even, as I was like absolutely bombing and just burning, I was like, right, I'm going to throw at least one ket joke in just to get the 2 lads. And the 2 lads came up to me and they're like, that was genuinely hilarious, but it's just, and I was like, I just said all the stuff that I have said on my YouTube videos, and that the captain messaged me and said, this is exactly the kind of thing we want. And the worst part of it was my lift back from that venue. It was 40 minutes after that. So I had to then sit in the bar with all those people for 40 minutes.
Wow.
And not one of them came up to say that was great. Obviously, all they were thinking is we could have paid someone who would have made us laugh to do that. and you have ruined our night. Although at that point I was like, I'm glad I got the money beforehand, because I would have felt awful to go up to someone afterwards and be like, by the way, can I have that money for whatever that was?
Yeah. Corporates are interesting. I think everybody sort of says how terrible they are, but obviously they're well paid. But it's different when a bunch of people are brought into a room and have comedy forced upon them, particularly when comedy is so subjective, rather than them going out to a comedy night.
Yeah, I've done really lovely corporates in the past. Like I did a water charity down by down by Embankment once. That was it was great, and you could tell that they'd been forced to stay after work to do this, to come to this comedy as part of their mental. It was like mental health week, and they were like, right, everyone has to stay at 5 o'clock. But we just approached it. I was the MC, and I just kind of said, "Who's the boss here? Who's the one who's making you all do this?" And they all pointed at someone, and it burst that tension balloon of we have to be here. So everyone lightened up.
Right.
And then I was like, right, who's that? And I identified like the certain people in the office. I was like, who's the one who's always drunk? And they started to have fun. Like most corporates I've done, they're fine or even can be great.
Yeah.
But just them ones catch you off guard where it's someone who's hiring you someone needs to take them to one side in the office and go, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like I've had someone suggest to me a rock night where between the bands, you have a stand-up comedian come up for 10 minutes. So everybody is stood up, all excited, all drinking, talking to each other, loud music, and then someone's going to get on stage and talk about their Tesco club card points. It's because people think that you can just put comedy into any situation and go, well, we'll just have a stand-up there. Before we do the eulogy, we'll get a stand-up.
You mentioned about lockdown very briefly. What was your lockdown experience when there was no live comedy available?
Oh, it was a dream. It was, I think I was, because before lockdown, I was gigging probably 5 or 6 nights a week.
Right.
And really just addicted to it. And so I think I needed that breather. It was actually, when it came, it was actually quite nice. Because there is that awful side of you that you're always looking at somebody else's ladder and going, oh, well, how far are they going? And because everybody just had to come to a slide and stop, there was no pressure on you to kind of keep progressing. And I cycle in my spare time, and it was great just to have these days where I'd finish work. And we had that first year, 2020, the summer was really nice. Yeah, like even in March, we could go out and do stuff. Yep. So I was just cycling after work. I mean, you do go a bit crazy because me and my housemate we joined an Angry Bird clan, like because we were so used to getting up, going into work, leaving work, going to a venue, having a few pints, doing comedy, and that now became that time you have before going to work. That's all back. Yeah, the 7 to 9, you've got that back. Yeah. The time after work that you take to get to a venue, so 5 to 8, you've got all that. Yeah. And then the rest of that night, 8 till 11, that's also yours as well. Yeah. So you're looking at 7 extra hours a day of just, I'm stuck with me. But then it also meant those gigs when you came back. Yeah. The first gig that I came back to was amazing. The atmosphere was electric. All the comedians, even the shit ones, were great because the vibe was just, oh God, we've missed this, and we didn't appreciate it for what it was. Yeah. And that there was a solid 3-month period where all gigs after that first lockdown, just felt great.
What about, did you do online stuff as well?
No, I mean, now that I do have a podcast that I started a few months back, I probably should have started it in all that free time. But it was back when there was a bit of snootiness towards podcasts, and even I was pushing against starting one because I was like, oh, everyone's got one, and then but so I didn't do that. We didn't create any online content, even though we were 3 comedians together. There was a point where we were going to host it was going to be an online gig for South Kensington Comedy Club, and the idea was that we'd MC it from our house, and then you'd cut to different comedians' houses. Yeah. And the BBC got in touch with the runner of that and said, "Oh, we'd like to do a story on this tomorrow." And we were like, "Oh, we're going to be on the BBC," but then it didn't really work right, and I think we messed up the connections with the other comics, so it just ended up us talking to each other in front of a camera. And then we got a message from the BBC that was like, we're going to go with a different angle, actually. Thanks. The best bit of content that we did, I guess, people were starting to go a bit crazy, and a lot of people were feeling a bit lonely. So we did an online Centurion. So do you know what a centurion is?
No.
It's something that I used to do in university when I had a body that could recover far better. And it's 100 shots of cider or beer over the course of 100 minutes, which sound, a shot of beer sounds like nothing. But once you get to like shot 30, you're starting to feel it. And you have to be at the table to do each shot. So if you need a piss, you got to be back in 59 seconds.
Right.
Or you have to do like a shot of tequila. And so it was the three of us. It was me, Hubert Meyer, and Richard Spalding.
Yeah.
Just on Instagram Live, and we were getting people who were like going crazy because they'd either had to been forced to stay with their parents or they were staying alone in a flat.
Yeah.
They were playing along, and we'd go to someone now and again and be like, "How are you getting on?" Or "What are you, how are you feeling?" And people were getting drunk, and some people even message us going, "Oh God, I've thrown up." But I got messages, after lockdown from people who said that actually really, really helped, just as something where we were all connected. And there was people, it was like going to the pub and getting drunk with people in there. The people who didn't know each other, who were like messaging each other through the Instagram, be like, "Oh God, have you managed to do all this? Oh, I see that you're drinking this. That was a bad idea." Because some people got like, the 6% Polish beer.
Yeah, right.
We're like, that's, you were doing about 8 pints of this. So
maybe not do the K cider.
No. Well, if you're gonna do it, torpedo it and make a big song and dance about it.
Yeah.
that was the one that I was like kind of happiest with in terms of content,
right.
Because it felt nice to kind of bring people who'd been lonely. And I think if you just put when people were putting on gigs over lockdown, it was nice, but it wasn't really that inclusive because you never had that back and forth. Whereas with that, it was an actual activity that we were getting people to do as well. That wasn't a quiz. That wasn't a fucking online quiz.
Yeah. What are the important lessons that you've learned? What philosophies do you take from show to show?
Oh God, always get paid afterwards, I guess. My main one is to always keep an eye on the rung that you're on. It is a ladder. You're gonna progress.
Yeah.
But I never like to think of a gig as beneath me. And so always going to any gig, even if you go to a gig like that boxing ring, I knew it was going to be terrible, but I didn't. I wanted it to go well, and I went in there. I didn't give up on it. And it's weird. Like it's like the reason why you're getting into this is to do this. It's not that if you're an intern, but it's because you want to be a marketing executive. The stuff you're doing, you don't enjoy, but you can see a forward goal.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it's great because the thing you wanted to do was stand on a stage and say jokes.
Yeah.
You're doing it. You've achieved that goal at day one.
Yeah.
And so to never treat it as, oh, well, I have to get to the next level. It's like, well, there's always going to be another level until you're selling out arenas. You'll always be thinking in terms of, I have to get to that next level. So instead of that, it's not about being content. Once you're off that stage, what's the next big stage? What's the next thing? Who can I message? What can I clip from this so that I get to put some online content? But if you actually, when you're at that gig, I love it that it's the thing I dreamed about doing, took a risk and it's actually worked.
Yeah.
Maybe I haven't got a Blu-ray out with my stand-up. I haven't got a Prime special, but that's not what I'm going for. What I'm going for is I'm on stage and I'm telling jokes and people are laughing sometimes, unless they're a golf club. So that's kind of my philosophy. It's just enjoy it.
Yeah. How can we find out about you? How can we find out what gigs you're playing?
I'm trying to keep it to myself for now. But so if people follow me on social media, I'm at Allerton Jamie on Instagram and at J Allerton on Twitter because I like to mix it up. Also, if I get cancelled on one account, people aren't going to instantly find me on the other one. And as we've said, I'm moving back to Liverpool, but I'm down in London all the time anyway. So don't worry, I'm not leaving you, London. I'll still be paying £7 for a pint in places. So I'd say just that. Oh, the podcast is called The Best Movie 2 with the number 2. So if people want to go on Twitter or Apple or Spotify, and find us there. Leave a 5-star review, even if you don't like it. Yeah, that's about it.
So finally then, Jamie, can you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Regret, just absolute regret. No, for me, comedy, it's not my words, but what's good is when you forget who said these things, you can just say that they're your own. But somebody said comedy is showing people the third side of a coin, which I like. It's the thing that's always been there, but people just don't notice it. I like that as a I know that sounds wanky, but it's more. It's just, like comedy is telling people something they already know, but they didn't know that they knew it like that.
Yeah, I like that.
And we can clip that. That's going to go viral. They're going to be like, wow, what a philosopher, what a sage.
Yeah.
I want to follow this guy's podcast, The Best Movie 2. I want to go see his show. Jamie Allerton goes to the movies. I want to send him money, all that.
Jamie, thank you so much. It's been fantastic.
No, cheers, mate. Thanks for having me on.